To present the first of our 2 winners is a longtime artist, writer, and former editor. I'm supposed to be waiting for, is he around? Larry. Where's Larry? Where's Larry? Hey, Larry. Larry Hama. Hama. Sorry. Hama. My Canadian A coming out. Yes. So he would be coming up to present Neal, but I don't see him, so I will take. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Larry Hama. Things were going too smoothly, so we had to interrupt with something.
Isn't it?
Okay.
Thank you for being here. It's all yours.
Neal Adams and inking. What can I say? The most important thing is that, like, when you think about Neal's work, and his inking especially, I mean, that's what gives it the quality that it makes it immediately recognizable as Neal Adams, is his fist and his technique and what he puts behind it. And the fact that a huge percentage of the lines are driven by conscious thought. When you look at a lot of inking, a good percentage of it is done on overdrive. Guys sit there and, okay. they know what they're delineating, you know, and you know, for a lot of what they're doing, they're just moving their hand. It's practiced and it's skill, but it's on overdrive. And when Neal inks, you get the sense that there's a big percentage of the millimeters of line are actually driven by conscious thought. That's a big difference. You know, and it makes it all very recognizable. When I first started working at Continuity in the early 70s, sometimes there would be 5 of us in the front room penciling storyboards and comps and motion boards as fast as our little fingers could do it. And there would be like me and Ralph Reese and Russ Heath and Carl Potts and whoever else penciling these things as fast as we could, and Neal would finish. And he'd go off to the coffee room and come back with a cup of coffee and a Linzer tart, and we'd be like, you know, furiously trying to catch up, and he'd have already gone through the stack, and he'd say, "You guys are wusses if you can't keep up with an old fart like me." And even then, as fast as it was, and he was inking with Pentel, you know, and the fact that he had 5 different guys with lots of different styles sitting there penciling it, once Neal inked it, it looked like Neal Adams. And there's not a super lot of inkers that you could say that about, that really can overpower everything. And the fact that he was able to convey this and to teach it to everybody that came up through the studio, through a real old-fashioned atelier art studio methodology. He started the crusty bunkers, which was pretty important to inking at that time. Crusty bunkers was put together because lots of times jobs would be so late. And you'd have to get a whole crew together to finish it. And Neal would put together the crew, and he would supervise it, and he would do the heads, and everybody else would do everything else. But he would go over everything and smooth it all out. And once that magic had happened, it all would hold together. And we could ink like an entire Doctor Strange story over the weekend, or do an entire John Buscema Savage Sword of Conan story over the weekend, which is pretty impossible. What he has done for inking on so many different levels is difficult to convey. I know that the only reason that I'm in the comic book business is because Neal had his foot in the door at DC when the attitude in the early 70s was like, well, we got everybody we need. I mean, we got Gil Cade, and we got all these guys that could do, 68 pages a week. What do we need with some, young Turk that can only do like a page a day? And Neal stuck his foot in the door, and he got in guys like Bernie Wrightson, Mike Kaluta, Jeff Jones, that wouldn't have been able to get in the door otherwise. And I got my first job penciling an 8-page horror story at DC because Neal said to the editor, look, if you give this kid an 8-page story to draw, I'll ink it. And that's how I got my foot in the door. And I've seen Neal do that countless times. So it's, his contributions to the entire concept of inking in comics is sort of hard to fathom, because a lot of what he did is under the surface, and his influence runs through all of it like that. I don't know what else I can say. But he's one of the most terrific inkers ever. I was very lucky as a young penciler that the first 4 people that ever inked my stuff were Ralph Reese, Wally Wood, Neal Adams, and Dick Giordano. So it's been downhill ever since. And that I know for a fact that every penciler I know that's ever been inked by Neal, appreciates it to the core. And if they were smart, they took it home and they studied every inch of it. Because what somebody that knows what they're doing does to your pencils as a penciler, just 1 page of that is like a master's degree, and you can't get that anywhere else. And I owe everything to this guy. What can I say? I love him.
Neal, you can come on up with our Ms. Inkwell escorts. Neal is a first-time nominee for the Sinnott Hall of Fame Award and first-time winner.
Thank you. Put this in my pocket. It's magnetic. It's got a magnet.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to put it there.
Don't
Okay. Don't try. I will try not to drop it. I could thank you guys, or I could tell you stories. What do you like?
Stories.
No thank. There's no this thank shit. No stories. Exactly. Okay. 3 stories. Stan Drake, Russ Heath, and Fred Eng. Are there any inkers here? Wannabe inkers? Inkers? Okay. Let me tell you the tool you'll never use. A Gillette 290 pen point. Have you heard of a Gillette 290 pen point? No? Yes? It's like a feather. Exactly. You know who uses it or used it when he was alive? Stan Drake. Oh, yes. Because Stan Drake used it. Because I didn't want anybody to be able to do what I couldn't do. Elmer Wexler never used a 290. Used a brush. Used a brush. Anyway, Stan Drake used a 290. Let me tell you something about pens and brushes. Philosophy. A brush, you can't feel it touch the paper. A pen, you can feel it touch the paper. So a pen is done by touch and eye, and a brush is done by eye, never by touch. Okay? That's the difference between the two. A Gillette 290, you can't tell when it hits the paper. It's made of steel, and it goes like this, boo, like that. As soon as you touch the paper, it goes boo, like that. And it lets the ink down. And if you don't make that line fast enough, it'll turn into a puddle. Stan Drake could take that line and use it for anything. Touch the paper, psh, finish the line. Never made a puddle. Very hard, very hard. Very few people can learn to use their tools that way. Stan Drake did, and I learned it because he did it, and because I hate somebody knowing something I don't know. So I learned it, okay? But there are lessons that are very hard to learn and almost impossible to learn, which is the second subject. Russ Heath, who had a mind like Michael Golden. There's only 2 people that I know in the world. There's only 2 people in the world that had minds like this. I'm going to kill you. 2 people in the world that had minds like this. Are you finished? Jesus. 2 people. Russ Heath and Michael Golden. They could project, and Golden still can, project what's in his mind to the paper and then trace it. If Russ Heath did a drawing, or Michael Golden did a drawing in pencil, and then he inked it, the pencil drawing would disappear under the line that he inked, and you couldn't find it. Russ Heath, when he was 10 years old, could draw a man, a cavalry officer, astride a horse, starting at the lower left-hand hoof of the horse, and then working up and finishing the guy and coming back down and finishing the whole thing at 10 years old. At 10 years, whatever he saw in his mind, he could do. Fantastic, but his inking style, made you look at him differently, because if you looked at Golden and you look at Russ Heath, you realize these guys are thinking alike, and Michael Golden learned it from Russ, because Russ is a genius. I don't know what kind of a genius, a crazy genius, but a genius. I have to say crazy genius because he was crazy. He could draw a tiger tank in perspective according to the lens that he had in his mind of how far that tiger tank was from the lens on a double-page spread, which he did in my studio, double-page spread, tiger tank coming at you with every piece of canvas and weaponry on it without reference, because he memorized it. And it would be perfect in perspective. Then he would shadow one side of it with cross-hatching. And the cross-hatching was so perfect that the same measurement was between each line. Michael Golden can do that. I don't know how. I can't. I am an artisan. They are artists. I don't understand. And I would turn to Russ and I would say, Russ, how do you do that? How do you do that cross-hatching? The angle is the same. He could go across 6 inches and the angle would be the same. I put a triangle on it, it would be the same. I said, do you like to do that? And he turned to me, looked at me as if I was crazy, and said, if somebody paid me to cross-hatch a wall, I would do it. Is that crazy? Okay. So there are geniuses in the business. People mysteriously sliding between the cracks that you don't know and you don't understand, but if you study both of these guys, you'll learn some things that fast. Michael Golden looked at Russ Heath's job that he did on Miracle Man and Mr. Miracle, and he absorbed everything that Russ did on that job and applied it immediately to his own work. Just looked at it and applied it, and his work changed overnight. Because he's a genius, but weird, like Russ. And you run into these people. Now I'm going to tell you, third story, that was the second story. First was the 290 pen point. This is the second, now the third. Fred Eng, never heard of him. He's an animation inker. When I was 15, I went to the School of Industrial Arts. It was called, at the time, it was called the School of Art and Design now. My granddaughter is going there. It's a great school. It's a high school, vocational high school. At night, we were given the opportunity to go to an animation studio and learn how to ink animation cells, old style, on acetate, over pencil drawings on paper. You put the acetate, and then you ink on the animation cells for Bert and Harry Peel, the Peels brothers, for Peel's Beer. Big, thick animation lines. And we were going to be trained, those of us who were lucky to be part of this, we're going to learn to become animation inkers, by Fred Eng, who had an accent. Now I have to tell you and apologize for this accent, because being 15 years old, we were all 15 years old, we made fun of it. And he had a kind of a funny accent. So I apologize, because as an adult, I'm not supposed to do this. But I'm going to do it. I'm gonna do the accent, because it's part of the story. So you have to forgive me. He would say, you pick up your boss, and show me how you hold your boss. And we look at each other and we kind of smile. We kind of laugh at him because his accent was, boss? Really? Okay. Pick up a boss. You say, look on your finger. That is a writer's bump. You have a writer's bump on your finger? Do you? Huh? A little bump, fine. Anybody who inks generally has that. I don't have it. Oh, pardon me. I don't have it. I don't have it. Fred Eng sent, feel my finger. Okay. 15 years old, I'll feel his finger. No writer's bump. Why? Because you Americans are gorillas. Huh? You Americans are gorillas. You hold your pen and your boss like a gorilla. Really? Oh. What do you mean? You hold your pen on the bone of your finger. Right there. How do you hold it? You hold your boss on the pads of 3 fingers. So you can do this while you ink. You can't do this. You can't do this, right? Can't rotate your hand. Can't rotate your fingers. He could rotate his hand. So therefore, he could take a brush and make a circle. And the hairs of the brush would follow his finger, follow the brush around, and make a circle. He could actually take a brush, which I don't have a brush on me, thin brush, and he could make a circle, and a half a circle, which was on the side of Harry Peel's hair. 1, 2, 3 loops in one stroke. Nobody in comics can do that. Nobody. Because we hold our bosses like gorillas. We do. It's true. We hold them against the bones of our fingers. So we have no movement. We don't know how to move our hand. So we looked at Fred Ang, and the dawning of reality came into our heads, and we said, this guy's a genius. This guy knows stuff that we don't know. So we wanted to learn from Fred. And he taught us many things. He taught us, I'll show you what he taught us. Brush, right? Tip of a brush. He said, you put your brush in the ink, you take your brush out of the ink, and you wipe your brush on the edge of the ink bottle, and then you wipe the tip and make a tip, and then you ink. Yeah? No? What? He says, why do you put your brush in the ink and then wipe it on the ink bottle and make the ink go back in the bottle? Because we're gorillas? Because you are gorillas. What are we supposed to do? Okay, he says, this is the tip. This is the inkwell. You put your brush in the ink, and you wipe the tip, and you leave the ink in the brush. Oh. And then you ink. Now you have a full brush of ink. Oh, God. Anyway, everything he taught us was right, and everything we did was wrong. And I'll show you what he did beside that. I'm going to exaggerate this a little bit. We worked on acetate, animation acetate. These were Bert and Harry Peel's eyes. Okay, that's the nose. This is the mouth down here. It's Bert and Harry. Bert was fat, Harry was thin. But they both had these eyes. He said, okay, I'm going to tell you the last story, but believe me, there are many more stories, he's going to say. So I'm just going to tell you one. He said, ink the eyes. Okay, we take the brush, we try to hold it right, and we make a circle. Then we fill it in with black, and then we make a circle, and we fill it in with black. He would say, no. Okay, what do we do? He says, you dip the brush in the inkwell, you wipe the very little tip. You take the brush and you put it there, in the middle, pull it away. And we watched him as the ink flowed down his brush and onto the acetate, and he pulled his brush away, and then the ink spread to the edge of the pencil drawing of that dot, and it stopped. Then he went to the other eye and he did the same thing, and the ink went to the edge of that pencil dot, and it stopped. That's how you make that circle. And I learned to do that because Fred Ang told me, and I knew I was a gorilla. If you learn to hold your brush right, you can do anything. You can make any kind of a stroke. You can make a stroke that's thick and thin. You can make a stroke that's just thin, that's just thick. You can make a stroke that starts thick and goes thin, make a stroke that starts thin and goes thick. I just described 6 strokes. Most inkers in American comic books ink 1 stroke, thick and thin and thick and thin. There's 5 or 6 different strokes you can use. You need to learn them. Artists need to learn them to be good inkers, to carry on traditions that have been known for thousands of years. The reason Fred Ang knew how to do this is because in the country he came from, he was inking lettering vertically on cloth and on paper since he was 2 years old. We don't have that tradition in America. So we need to find it. We need to reach out. We need to go to other countries, and we need to learn that. That's what I learned from Fred Ang. And maybe that's why I got the award today. I don't know. Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, Neal Adams. Right on. All right. What are we going to follow that with? Joe Sinnott, this award's namesake and first winner, made the following statement about this year's inductees. I was thrilled to learn of the 2 newest members to be inducted into the Inkwell Awards Hall of Fame. Neal Adams has certainly made his mark in the comic industry. When I think of Neal, I am drawn to his work on Batman and Green Arrow. Also running Continuity Associates Studio in New York City that gave many new up-and-coming young artists their start in comics. Neal and I were fortunate enough to work together on 2 Thor series. Then decades later, we were asked to work together once more on a Batman blank cover to support the Inkwell Awards. That was certainly a lot of fun. Dan Adkins has also had a long, distinguished career in comics. Dan was a great penciler in his own right, but primarily as an inker. His work on the Doctor Strange comics is what I remember him best for. Dan, like me, was a very sought-after inker, having inked a number of artists, far too many to count. His ink line sure brought out the best in many pencilers. He is truly missed. It is with great pride and pleasure that we get to welcome these 2 fine artists and inkers into the Inkwell Awards family. Congratulations on your election into the Inkwell Awards Hall of Fame and the newest recipients of the Joe Sinnott Hall of Fame Award, class of 2019. Well done, gentlemen. Jolton Joe Sinnott.